Hey, what's going on guys? Welcome back to another Kingdom Hearts video. So, the Master of Masters is a character that was introduced in Kingdom Hearts Key and Kingdom Hearts Key back cover that has since been a really interesting character to keep an eye on. And I say that because it seems like wherever you go, the Master of Masters is always there. We see him in the Age of Fairy Tales when we first see him in Kingdom Hearts Key and back cover. We of course see him later in Kingdom Hearts 3 Remind with young Xehanort as the person who essentially set him down the path right before his Mark of Mastery exam by of course giving him the world tour. We even see him show up in the universe of Unreality. We see him constantly going through multiple points of the series that are spread so far apart that there's no way he could get there without time travel. But then at the end of Kingdom Hearts 3, something interesting happened. During the secret ending with Sora and Riku waking up in what we know now to be Quadratum, we also see two key characters there, Yozora and the Master of Masters. We know that Yozora is likely there because he's likely from the world of Quadratum and that universe, but today I want to focus on the Master of Masters. I had a previous theory on the channel that the Master of Masters has the ability to cross between universes without the use of things like the Arc, but then I got to thinking, the Master of Masters had to have used some form of time travel to get to future events, but then he ends up in Quadratum. What if the Master of Masters isn't actually there by his own choice? It is possible that the Master of Masters is actually in Quadratum because he broke a law of time travel and suffered the same fate as our main character, Sora. Now then, let's dive into this theory about the true fate of the Master of Masters. So let's talk about the rules of time travel really quick because I think it's important to establish this before we get into the theory. Rule number 1. Before you can time travel, you have to first abandon your body and become a disembodied heart so you'll be able to break through the barriers of time. Then after that, there are also limits to where you can go. Rule number 2 is you can only travel one way through time. So once you pick a direction, that's it, ain't no hopping 75 years into the future, then immediately 3,000 years to the past from there. Third, you can only travel to points in time where other versions of yourself exist. So if you don't exist 2,000 years into the future, then you can't travel 2,000 years into the future. Fourth, whenever you return to your time, you don't have any memories of when you time travel. So when you come back to your original time, you have no memory of what just happened, almost like you never even time traveled. But the experience is etched into your heart, so that in itself can subconsciously change your perspective and influence future decisions. And finally, no matter what you do, events that are supposed to happen will happen. No matter what you do in the past, you can't do anything to change events that are etched into time. So these are the rules of time travel, and if you break them, you essentially get booted from the universe like Sora did in Kingdom Hearts 3 for what he did in Remind. But how does all of this relate to the Master of Masters? Well, we know that he is from the Age of Fairy Tales, possibly even from a time before that because of course he has told us that he was involved in a war that everyone since has long forgotten about. But in Kingdom Hearts back cover, we see the Master of Masters tell the foretellers that in time he's going to vanish, dim, or fade. Basically, he knows that he's gonna be gone soon because, well, he says it. He actually says one day I might disappear. And a lot of people, including myself, have speculated that he meant he was going to just leave and go into the future and continue his plans, and that is what I believed happened as well, but there also could have been a catch to it. The Master very well could have gone into the future to carry out his plans, and we know for a fact that we did because we see him. But first things first, how could that have happened if there isn't a version of him waiting in the future? Because again, the Age of Fairy Tales was hundreds of years before the events of Kingdom Hearts 1, and I'm sure he couldn't have just lived that long. Well, there are actually two ways I've thought of, both of which include time travel. I made a video on this channel before that basically said the Master of Masters could have put a part of his heart inside of the box, and with Luxu essentially hopping through bodies to live his life from the Age of Fairy Tales to now while keeping the black box with him, essentially a version of the Master of Masters exists wherever the black box is. By putting his heart in the box, the Master of Masters could essentially travel to any point in time that would help him continue his plan. Or another thing that could show up is that the Master of Masters could have actually put a piece of his heart inside of Luxu himself. Even if there's something else in the black box, we know that a version of him had to exist at least when he talked to young Xehanort in Remind, so it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility that Luxu was actually part Master of Masters. But while the Master of Masters traveling to the future doesn't necessarily break any rules of time travel, it actually comes down to what he told Luxu to do. With the Master of Masters giving Luxu the gazing eye, essentially his eye, to see what happens in the future, that gives the Master of Masters all the information he needs to write the Book of Prophecies. And it's because of the gazing eye and the eventual Book of Prophecies that comes along with it that the Master of Masters knows what's going to happen and when. It's with the Book of Prophecies and the gazing eye that he knows where and when he needs to be to bend the future to his will. And while that method isn't nearly as direct as what Sora did in Remind, that's still a blatant abuse of time travel. By sending his eye into the future with the Gazing Eye Keyblade and writing the Book of Prophecies, he has all the information he needs to essentially place people where he needs them to be to rewrite the events of the future to his liking, and that clearly breaks the law of time travel and commits a taboo of nature just like Sora did. But the fact that he said he might disappear in Key back cover could have meant that he knew what he needed to do and basically told the foretellers to just get ready and left. And even though we've seen him in recent Union Cross updates that have shown him and Luxu in a post-Keyblade War world, there's a legitimate possibility that he didn't leave immediately after saying he would disappear. Since back cover takes place from the view of the foretellers, to them he did end up disappearing. But after doing what he needed to do in other timelines, the Master of Masters could have returned to his original time and disappeared, just like what happened to Sora at the end of Kingdom Hearts 3. The conversation that the Master of Masters had with Ira could have happened after he had already done what he needed to do and was just waiting to leave. That would also explain how he ended up in the world of Quadratum and the universe of Unreality, which we all know he has some sort of plan for because we see him making the heart shape over the moon, which of course represents Kingdom Hearts. And him being seemingly trapped there like we believe Sora is something that couldn't necessarily be an issue for the Master of Masters, because we saw that Xehanort had some contingency plans for his master plans should something go wrong, and with the level of planning that the Master of Masters would have a plan that spans multiple universes, it would make sense that if he were to essentially get removed from the universe of Kingdom Hearts by force, he would have some sort of plan to make it back should it be that easy. Because honestly, we all assume he can go between universes at will, but I think it's important to look at the possibilities of what would happen if he actually couldn't. And setting up the pieces in the universe of Kingdom Hearts to make sure he returns to that universe before getting booted to Unreality could all have been a part of his larger plan for Phase 2 of the Kingdom Hearts series. But even with that, I want to know what you guys think. Do you think the Master of Masters actually got himself kicked out of the universe on purpose, and is it all according to his plan? Let me know down below in the comments, or send me a theory of your own in the official Guardians of Twilight Discord server. It could possibly come in the next video. And if you liked the theory, leave a like to let me know you enjoyed it. And finally, if you want to become a Guardian of Twilight, make sure you subscribe and turn notifications on. But that's going to be all from me today. This is Moose Wayne, signing off.